Sometimes life feels like an old diary, its pages stained with tears, laughter, and prayers that never found their way home. My name is Mary Thomas. I am 82 years old now, but there was a time when my hands weren't wrinkled and my heart was full of courage. It was 1964 when I left my small village in India and came to America with my husband and our 1-year-old son. We carried only 2 suitcases, a handful of savings, and a dream that someday life would be kind. But when we landed here, everything felt foreign: the cold air, the tall buildings, even the smiles of strangers. Nights were the hardest. I would hold my baby close, afraid of what tomorrow would bring, whispering to myself, "You can't cry now, not when he depends on you." And somehow, those whispers became my strength. But who knew the battles waiting ahead would test not just my strength, but my very soul? The first few years in America felt like walking barefoot through a storm. My husband worked double shifts at a factory, while I cleaned houses just to afford rent and milk for our son. The winters were cruel, snow biting through our thin coats and hearts weighed down by loneliness. I still remember standing by the window, watching other families decorate their Christmas trees, while we barely had enough money for dinner. Sometimes I'd smile and wave at them, pretending not to feel the ache inside. I wanted my son to believe we were happy, even when our fridge was empty and our dreams were fading. Every night I would pray softly, not for comfort, but for courage, courage to survive one more day. Little did I know, survival wasn't the hardest part. It was learning to keep smiling while slowly breaking inside. Years went by, and our little boy grew up fast, maybe too fast. I used to watch him from the kitchen window, running with his American friends, laughing in a way I couldn't understand. He spoke English better than me, dreamed bigger than us, and slowly he stopped holding my hand when we walked to the store. I was proud but also afraid, afraid that he would forget the struggles behind his comfortable life. There were nights when I'd hear him argue with his father, saying we didn't fit in, that we were too old-fashioned. I would hide in the bedroom and cry quietly. I wanted to tell him every sacrifice we made, every tear we shed was for him. But sometimes silence becomes a mother's language. Tell me, have you ever loved someone so much that watching them drift away still made you smile? One summer evening, I found an old letter I had written to my mother back home, never sent, just folded away with my tears. In it, I had written about how I missed the smell of rain in our village, how I missed hearing her voice say, "Everything will be all right." But life in America didn't wait for emotions. There was no time to cry, no time to rest, just endless work, bills, and survival. When my husband fell ill, I took extra shifts, cleaning offices at night and caring for him during the day. I remember looking at my reflection in a glass door once, hair unkempt, eyes swollen, hands rough from detergent, and thinking, is this the same girl who once dreamed of a better life? I had lost myself somewhere between duty and love, but I never complained. Because sometimes silence is not weakness, it's sacrifice. And yet, in that silence, my heart kept whispering, maybe one day, someone will understand what it cost to survive. The years blurred together, birthdays, anniversaries, all passing like quiet shadows. My husband's health declined, and soon I was the only one working. Our son had moved out by then, chasing his own dreams, too busy to visit. I never blamed him. I had raised him to be independent after all, but a mother's heart doesn't understand distance. Sometimes I'd sit alone at the dinner table, 2 plates set out of habit, waiting for a voice that never came. I started talking to the walls, to the memories, to the echoes of laughter that once filled our small apartment. People say time heals all wounds, but they never talk about the loneliness that time leaves behind. I would watch the city lights from my window, each one reminding me of a dream that once burned bright and slowly faded. Because the hardest part of love isn't letting go, it's learning to live with the silence that follows. When my husband passed away, the house felt unbearably quiet, like even the walls were mourning. I remember sitting beside his hospital bed, holding his cold hand, whispering, "You can rest now, I'll take care of everything." But when he was gone, I realized there was nothing left to take care of. The man who had shared my struggles, my laughter, my youth, had taken half of my world with him. The next morning, I made tea for 2 out of habit and broke down when I realized only 1 cup was needed. I would sit in his chair every evening, pretending he was still reading the newspaper beside me. Sometimes, grief doesn't come in tears, it comes in empty chairs, in echoes of voices you'll never hear again, in photographs that smile back at you from another lifetime. And yet, even in the deepest sorrow, a small voice inside me whispered, "You still have to live for the love that once was." After he was gone, I decided to move to a smaller place, just a tiny apartment near the old park where we used to sit together. It was quieter there, simpler. Every morning, I'd walk to the park, sit on the same wooden bench, and watch children play, their laughter filling the air like music I once knew by heart. Sometimes, a little girl would run up to me and smile, and for a brief moment, I'd feel warmth again, as if life hadn't forgotten me completely. I started baking cookies for the neighborhood kids, telling them small stories about courage, love, and family. They called me Grandma Mary. And maybe that's when I realized family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the love you give to strangers who need it. I found pieces of my broken heart scattered in those smiles. But even with all the laughter around me, a quiet question kept echoing in my heart. Who am I when everyone I loved is gone? Years passed like the turning pages of a fading photograph album. My hair turned silver, my steps slower, but my memories, they stayed as vivid as the first day I arrived in America. Sometimes I'd sit by the window, watching the sunset melt into the city skyline and whisper to myself, "We made it, didn't we?" I thought of my son, now successful, living far away with his own family. He'd call once in a while, his voice filled with hurried love. "Ma, I'll visit soon," he'd say, but soon never came. I'd smile and tell him I was fine, though my heart longed to see his face again. Love has a strange way of surviving distance. It hurts, yet it keeps you alive. And while I miss the past terribly, I learned something beautiful, that even pain, when carried with grace, becomes a kind of love story. Because sometimes the greatest strength a heart can show is learning to smile while waiting for someone who may never return. One winter evening, it started snowing softly, like a memory returning home. I sat near the window, knitting a small sweater for no one in particular, just to keep my hands busy. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, I saw my son, older now, his eyes tired but full of guilt. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he just hugged me, a long, trembling hug that said everything words never could. I felt his tears fall on my shoulder, and all the years of distance melted away in that single embrace. We spent the night talking about life, about mistakes, about love we both had buried under silence. Sometimes life brings you full circle, just to remind you that forgiveness is another name for peace. As I looked into his eyes, I whispered, "You finally came home." But none of us knew that this reunion, so full of love, would be the last chapter of my story. A few weeks after that night, my health began to fade quietly, like a candle burning its last light. I could feel it, my time was near, but I wasn't afraid anymore. My son visited often now, holding my hand and reading me old letters I once wrote to his father. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I told him softly, "Promise me, you'll live with love, not regret." He nodded through tears, and I smiled because, for the first time in decades, I felt complete. All the pain, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, they were never in vain. I had lived a life full of struggle, yes, but also full of love. And when I closed my eyes for the last time, I knew somewhere in this big, busy world, a mother's story had finally found peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because somewhere out there, every Grandma Mary still waits to be remembered.